I just got finished watching Frieren and I was looking at this guy's axe and I was like, I want that. So I made it. Cause who doesn't like a badass axe displayed in their room, right? So throughout this video, I'll be showing you step by step on how I made this axe, the materials that we're gonna use, and I'll be giving you tips and advice on what I will do differently so you could apply them to your own build. So let's jump right in. Alright, so before we start, I want to talk about the materials that we are gonna be using for this project. You'll be needing a soldering iron to melt all the pieces together to create a strong bond, a 16mm outer diameter black metal pipe with a length of 155 centimeters, some cheap leather wrapping, masking tape, some sandable putty, a few cans of filler primer, a can of black spray paint. I'll be using chrome spray paint, but you could always use the graphite powder method if you so please. And lastly, some clear coat spray paint. Now that we're done with all the materials that we'll need, let's move on to the 3D files. I got this amazing model off of MakerWorld, and I'll be using my Bambu Lab P1S printer to print out all the different parts. Download the files and open it up in Bambu Studios. Once you have your file loaded, you'll be greeted with 6 different build plates that you can print from, but we'll be mainly focusing on the first plate. As you can see, if we were to print this plate on a P1S printer, it does not fit. This is actually caused by 2 problems, where the model is actually not oriented correctly for the build plate, and the second one is that there's brim supports that extend out of the build plate. So what we could do is actually finesse our way for the model to fit on the build plate just by rotating it or however orientation you want it, but I do recommend printing it horizontally for the maximum strength output, as this would be the base and the support for all the pieces. So if you were to print this vertically, it might not support and it will just break off quite easily once all the other pieces are attached. So you could honestly just follow the orientation I have on this build plate right now, or you could just go on your own method. And now let's move on to the brim supports. So first go to the left column that you have, press on Object, and go to Others. Once you're there, click on Brim Supports and you'll see this brim type. For whatever setting it has for you, change that to no brim. So what this does is basically removes the outer rim when slicing. The outer rim is usually just to prevent the print from failing, but in this case we don't need it as the model is already quite big and it will be stable on the build plate. Now you see that the model fits. I would recommend changing the quality to 0.16mm, so you just do less post-processing later on. And for the handles or round surfaces on the other plates, you could also up the quality as well. I'm not really worried about the rounder edges, as 0.16mm is enough to create quite a smooth surface. Oh yeah, before we move on, I would recommend printing out a small section of the base where the handle sits. So basically just cut up the model until it looks like this. Print that out and try to fit it on the handle that you have. Make sure that it fits nicely and there's enough tolerance. If not, your pieces are just gonna flop around in your handle. But you wouldn't want it too tight either. If not, it will crack your print and it will cause quite a bit of issues. But if you were to make me choose one or the other, I'd rather go with a looser fit because we can just fix it with some duct tape. What that does is it puts tension between the pieces, and if you have ever glued plastic onto metal, it just doesn't work. So having that extra layer of tape will just help us glue it on better. Now that all of that is ready, we are ready to print. I'll be using PETG for this build instead of PLA for more durability and heat resistance, as we'll be actually swinging this prop around, so I want it strong and sturdy. And now that all the pieces are printed, we could do a quick assembly just to see how everything is fitting and if we need to do any changes. If there's no issues, we could move on to welding all the pieces together. But before anything starts, please wear a respirator and gloves just to be protected. Safety is important, and I don't want any of you guys getting hurt. So yeah, moving on to the next bit. I do recommend using a flatter tip for the weld so that when you connect the pieces together, it will be a much flatter and smoother surface. In this clip here, you could see that there's tape attached to different pieces of the print here. That's just for me to get a better result when welding. It just helps me align the pieces and I could just get a more accurate result. When you weld, do go in deeper into the plastic as you can see in the clip so that it gets a stronger support, a stronger attachment for the piece. If there is too big of a gap to seal back, just use some of the support waste that you have lying around and just use that as extra plastic to cover the seams. Once we are done welding all the pieces, do some quick checks if there's any imperfections that you want to go back and fix. And we can start with the next step, which is applying putty to seal off any small cracks and seams that we still have. When applying the putty, do push down harder because we do want a seamless finish and it will just prevent air bubbles from forming at the bottom. Give it about an hour to dry and we can start sanding. We're gonna use higher and higher grits of sandpaper as we go. The initial grit I used was 80 up to 200, 400, then 1000. Now after the first pass of sanding, we can move on to applying primer to all the different pieces. Here I'm doing a light pass of primer over all the different pieces. When priming your pieces, make sure to keep your spray paint at a distance to prevent too much overspray, but if you do overspray, it's still alright because we'll be sanding the pieces again. It's just that if there's overspray, it's just gonna be slightly more work to do. I'm putting all the smaller pieces at an angle just so I can get into the smaller crevices with the primer. Once your priming is done, you should see that most of your pieces should be decently smooth at this point. And we can move on to our second pass of sanding. We're gonna be doing this whole process 3 times, so that's 3 times of priming and 3 times of sanding. Usually I'll only be doing 2 passes, but we want a glossy and shiny finish, so we'll be doing 3. I decided to add some more putty and sand it over because I realized there was still some gaps and leftover air bubbles from the first pass of putty. Once you have finished with all your sanding and priming, we'll just be applying one last thick coat of primer just to prep our props ready to be painted. And at this stage, you can really see how shiny and reflective the blade has gotten. So yeah, this will actually be foreshadowing to what will happen later on in the video. Moving on to the painting process, I started off with a flat black base coat for all the different pieces. This just gives me a good base layer to enhance the chrome color that we're gonna be applying on the pieces later on. If you're using different brands of primer and spray paint, make sure to test out to see whether or not your paints are compatible. If not, it could lead to possible cracking or peeling. And we do not want to have that process happening because if not, we'll have to sand down the whole piece again. I applied a thicker coat of black for the blade piece because it will be the main part that people are drawn to and it's the only black part that is exposed. So you could use this opportunity to hide some of the small imperfections that you may still have. Once you're sure that your pieces has all dried up, you could start masking off sections of your blade piece to apply your other paints. After I masked off the chrome area that I'm gonna apply for the blade, I'm just gonna apply a thick layer of clear coat spray paint just to protect the layer of black paint. And the reasoning why I masked off the chrome areas is because that if clear coat is applied to any chrome surfaces, the chrome isn't gonna be as shiny as without the clear coat. While letting the clear coat dry, I started spraying on chrome on the other pieces. When working with chrome, you need to be very gentle with the paint because any small smudges or any small scratch would be very visible on the paint. And if you have ever worked with chrome paint, you'll know that it exposes every single mistake that you have. All the layer lines, all the small dents, all the scratches. It is all very obvious. That's why you need to be very thorough with your sanding and priming process. But it is also one of the more rewarding parts, because this is where you would see all your hard work coming to life. Like, come on, look at this. Does this not look amazing? It's so shiny. Anyways, after masking the blade, I used a plastic sheet to cover the top part so I don't waste more masking tape, because that stuff is expensive. I will usually let them set for 1 to 2 days after the chrome paint was set. If not, if you applied slightly more pressure on the paint, your fingerprints will still show up on the surface. So, do you remember the foreshadowing I talked about earlier in the video? Yeah. Turns out, some of the chrome paint leaked through the plastic sheet, got onto the black paint. I tried to repair it with another black color spray paint, but it didn't work because the tone was slightly off and it was messing with my head. So I decided to go out, buy a new can of spray paint, redid the whole black base coat on the blade, masked again, put on chrome again, just for it to run out of chrome mid-spray. So I had to go out, get new chrome, and when I came back and I tore off the tape adhesive was left on the blade. And while trying to salvage the blade using sandpaper, because the adhesive was left on the black paint, it scratched the chrome paint and it caused like groove marks into the chrome paint. And if you remember prior, when I talked about the chrome paint in the video, I said it leaves any mishaps that you have. It is very obvious on the chrome. So I had to unmask, mask on, put black spray paint on, clear coat, tear off the mask again, wait for the clear coat to dry, mask on the black paint area again just to spray on chrome. I did all of this 3 times. And honestly, on the last time, I wanted to sand everything off, but it would have been just too much. So we leave it as it is. Honestly, now looking at it, it's not that bad. Even on camera, you can hardly see it. But man, did that mess with me. And honestly, this process took about like another week. So I was too fed up to record any footage. And I do really apologize for that. But luckily, the whole building process is already finished. So let me show you the end result. Honestly, overall, it still came out pretty dang good. If you look from afar, it's honestly not that bad. But you could see the difference from the blade to the other handle pieces. But still, overall, I'm quite happy with it. I'm quite surprised on how to scale this prop is, even when I didn't scale up any of the pieces. It doesn't feel bad to hold either, like I can swing this around no problem. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you found this video helpful, and if I missed out anything in particular. I'll try to get back to any comments as soon as possible. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye!